We're now live. I'm going to start the Zoom recording too.
Thank you for your help. Welcome in, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here for the PCEF Committee meeting on March 20th at 6 p.m. It's 6:03 p.m. and I'm going to kick this meeting off. Next slide, please. Welcome in, everyone. So guidelines applied to virtual meetings. Chat box is open for introductions and for noting public comment interests. All other times, host-only chats for PCF staff. Please raise your hand, used by the committee and presenters only. Video on for committee and presenters only. Microphone for public members, please be muted. Recording, this meeting is being recorded because it is a public meeting, and captioning, this meeting is being captioned. You can go to settings and show the subtitles. And this is an open meeting to the public. You're invited, the public is invited to comment at public comment around 6:05, and there will be a break around 6:40. Online participants will see a break screen. There will be no online discussion available during that break. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda for this evening. Welcome and introductions, public comment at 6:05, 6:06 now. Approval of the January 16th meeting minutes, that is an action item. Program updates, take a 5-minute break. And then the annual CIP update process and timeline discussion. And then we hope to close the meeting at 7:30 this evening. Next slide, please. Introductions for PCEF committee members. Ramfis, would you like to start us off and then pass to the next committee member? Just give us a brief introduction, your name, your pronouns, and your position on the committee.
Yep. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Ramfis Junchino Toro, he, him pronouns, and co-chair, and I will kick it over to Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramfis. I'm Tracy Scott, committee member, PCEF committee member. She, her pronouns. I'll send it over to Robin.
Good evening, everybody. Robin Wang, committee member, he, him pronouns. And Faith, you're next on my screen.
Good evening, everyone. Faith Graham, she, her, committee member. Let's see, I have to go to a different screen. D'Angelo.
Hey, good evening, everybody. D'Angelo Moaning, PCEF committee member. Happy first day of spring. I just learned that today. And I'll pass it to Alicia.
Good evening, everyone. Alicia Chapman, she, her pronouns, committee member. And I apologize, I'm driving. I can't see.
Yes. So I'll kick it over to Megan, Dr. Megan Horst, please.
Hi, everybody. Just Meg or Megan's fine.
Okay.
PCEF co-chair and committee member. And good to see you. It does not feel like spring yet.
Soon, very soon. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. It's so great. Next slide, please. So I, as your facilitator, love to make sure that I am grounded. So I'm going to invite everybody else to be grounded. I invite you to close your eyes or gaze softly down. And if you are driving, please do not do this. Please close your eyes and just feel your feet firmly planted on the floor. And feel the chair supporting you, both under your legs and on your back. I invite you to take 3 deep breaths, nice and slow, whatever count you want to use, breathing in and breathing out. Do this on your own count, please. And when you're done, I invite you to gently open your eyes and to take a big stretch up. Oh, yes. Wake up that lymphatic system. All right. Thank you so very much. Next slide, please. All right. I would love to invite public comment. Please indicate your interest in providing public comment by raising your hand or indicate your interest through the Zoom chat function. For those joining the meeting by phone, please enter *9 on your phone to indicate your interest in providing public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to give public comment? Sam, do we see any people raising their hands?
No, we do not.
Okay, then I would like us to move forward, please. Next slide. Meeting minutes action item. So, are there any changes to the meeting minutes from January 16th? Would someone like to make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from January?
This is Rand Feast. Motion to accept the January 16th meeting notes.
Any
Seconded.
second?
And I second.
Wonderful. Those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Beautiful.
Aye.
Thank you so much. The minutes are accepted. Beautiful. Next slide, please. Program updates. Sam, I would love to invite you in.
Okay. I've got just a few notes here that I want to share around just where we are on a few programs that have been key marquee programs for us. So I'm going to share some updates on our strategic programs 3 and 6, and then a couple updates around other programming that we've been working on in collaboration with our partners at Prosper Portland. I'll just give a little highlight around some upcoming budget content for next week. That's going to go before the Climate Land Use Resiliencies Committee of the City Council. We'll give you a little bit on our community grant cycle, which will also open next week. And then I'll just give a little moment to speak to some of the federal impacts that we're currently seeing. I know that Dr. Horst, you asked about this. This was a topic of an Oregonian article earlier, I believe, this week. And so I'll speak to that in a bit. So first, just starting out with strategic program 3, just as a reminder, I could have written this out, probably should have written this out. This is our clean energy and single family homes program. This is our largest program. It's our $140 million program that's intended to retrofit 3,100 single family homes over the course of this current climate investment plan. And for folks that have been tracking that, we've been going through the contracting process to bring our administrator, and I'm excited to share that we're pretty close to executing our agreements with our administrators there. And so a lot of our implementers and their partners have already begun the program design work that'll be crucial to that program kicking off later this spring and fall. But we're quickly moving ahead, and a lot of the work now is moving to just developing the program brand, the website, some of the public-facing name of the program, hosting kickoff meeting with our implementing partners. We've got an all-day kickoff meeting here in early April, and then setting up just our home audit data platform. So we're really excited. This has been a long journey. This was a good, obviously, a significant RFP for us to run through our procurement division. So a lot of lessons learned, and we're continuing to move ahead. And so that is the largest program of our climate investment plan, and it's moving ahead well. Next
Sam?
up, yes,
Sam, how many homes did you say? I didn't get that.
3,100 homes.
Thank you so much.
3,100 homes. And I'm trying to think if there's any other key data points there, but I think what's important to note there, it's a critical program in terms of serving both low income and moderate income households. Just as a reminder for folks, there's different incentive levels within the program for homeowners as well as renters, but homeowners up to 80% area median income, as well as going all the way up to homeowners at 150% area median income, and just different incentives at each of those levels. So the program that we're excited to get out on the street here shortly.
Thank you.
And then our next program that our transportation decarb, and just big kudos to the team that has been working on this. This is Shannon Todd Roth on our team, as well as Chris Gruba and so many others. And then our transportation decarbonization team, particularly Sita Reem Rao, has been leading our work on strategic program 6. This is our e-bike access and incentive program. And I suspect in terms of just looking at other jurisdictions, this will probably arguably be one of our most sort of, from a retail perspective, popular program. And so we've completed that RFP and are currently working on getting it under contract, and are excited and eager to do a soft launch of the program later this fall as the program development gets underway. And so that's just another key milestone that, as you all recall, was part of the original climate investment plan. And then some additional work that we've been doing in collaboration with our partners at Prosper Portland. Prosper Portland is our administrator for our strategic programs focused on clean energy improvements in small commercial buildings. But as part of some of our access to capital resources, this is our strategic program number 14, we've been working with our colleagues at Prosper Portland to essentially kick off a pilot program for office to residential conversions. And we're trying to really understand, we're working on a few projects right now to really understand what is the embodied carbon savings of office to residential conversions when you take an existing office building, warehouse building, and convert it, and trying to understand what is the carbon savings from not demoing the entire building and building up. So that's a pilot effort that we're doing, bringing on consultants to help us understand, do that analysis, as there's just been a lot of interest in office to residential conversions. So those are just a few updates. Obviously, there's many more, but I just want to share those few top line measures. And then notably, you all have probably captured a lot of news around us related to the FY fiscal year 25-26 budget. That is very well under swing, and folks are working through that process. And as you know, we have a new form of government, and so they're figuring out exactly how we work through a budget process. And so city administrator at the end of February released sort of a draft budget. In there, you folks might have seen there was the interest was noted in there from PCEF that was captured in that draft budget. And so since then, there's been a range of conversations regarding the budget. I think the main thing I want to share here, not to really jump ahead of the conversation, it's largely so folks are aware, you all as well as members of the public, we will be going before the Climate Land Use Resiliency Committee of the City Council next week on the 27th. And giving a preview of our budget and having a discussion there. And so I know that our co-chairs, Dr. Horst and Ramfis, are both going to be there. But I just want to make sure you all are aware of that. And we're happy to provide the slide deck for that here shortly as we're going to wrap that up here. And equally, I guess, exciting in a very different way, but our key marquee program, our community grants program, is going to be kicking off next week. And so that'll be released next week, and that'll be open for about 60 days, all the way through end of May. And this is, for a time for us, this really honors the core spirit of the program. This is about the core of the design of the program. And so this is when there's just a lot of activity, and a lot of our work and team orientation has been designed around this. During that 2-month period, as you all know, each round we've successively refined our technical assistance processes, the way we provide our office hours, all of that. All of that information will be available on our website next week as we hit go once the community grant cycle opens up. And we expect to have around 70 million available in this next round. And the expectation here is opening it, getting through the application review, evaluation, selection process through the summer, early fall, and heading to City Council in fall of this year for that cycle. And then last, I think, and I suspect, and I'll stop, and I know there'll be questions on this, and I encourage any questions on anything else I shared here. But, you know, we are continuing to work on executing. We've executed a vast majority of our agreements that were awarded by City Council last, I believe, September, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're currently working with many of our grantees, and I think this question came up earlier as part of the news cycle related to some of the federal impacts that are happening. But at a really high level, what we're seeing here is that there's a lot of uncertainty still with the way the federal actions are playing out in terms of climate programming and other resources that are oftentimes co-funding many of our projects. We've seen many start and stops for our grantees where, you know, they're accessing those federal resources through their portals. You know, there's a portal where they can access reimbursements. They freeze on them, they unfreeze. We haven't actually heard of any official terminations yet related to any of the projects we're funding. But we know that there are, you know, organizations that have had their funding terminated that are part of projects we are not funding. And so that's something we're incredibly cognizant to. We know that that's going to drive more volume to us this coming year. It's something we're keeping an eye out in terms of just one of the elements we'll be looking at is making sure we're supporting probably a wider group of organizations. And so that relates to some of the changes we did make this round as part of our community grants round. There is a limit for each organization that they can only apply for up to 2 grants, whereas previously there was you know we had organizations apply for 5, 6, and more in some instances. And so a lot of that has just been lessons learned, regardless of some of these federal impacts around how do we better manage the application volume and set folks up so they're teed up to implement projects that they've got capacity to implement. And so that's largely where we're at. We're really in a waiting game to see how things continue to play out. It has absolutely caused a lot of disruptions for many of the organizations we're working with, and so we're absolutely sensitive to that. And there's still it's almost more chaotic in the fact that there's that uncertainty. But I'll stop there and just see if just any questions about anything else I shared, but certainly that part of the update as well.
Thank you so much, Sam. Robin?
Yeah, hi, Sam. Thanks for the update. I got a question back to that, I think Strategic Program 14, the capital one. It sounds like that has evolved a bit since the CIP. It was my understanding that the original intent of that those funds were to provide kind of fair and accessible capital, with the implication that that would be to residents or consumers. And using that capital for office to residential conversions seems to be a little bit of a leap.
It's the framework we're applying is still financing to those projects. In large part, those are opportunities that came our way in terms of being able to explore what are the real emissions reductions. We view this at this moment, it's a pilot. There are about 2 projects we're having active conversations, not maybe a third. And it's a small set of those resources. We still intend to go out for the broader RFP to address the other parts of the sector, certainly residential financing products as well as broader consumer financing products. But it's been, frankly, just a function of staff capacity that we haven't been able to turn around and move on some of those other products. And this was certainly an opportunity as we worked with Prosper Portland on some of their other financing programs, their property fit program, which is focused on commercial buildings. It's sort of that's sort of where the conversation came, where there's gaps that we're seeing here. There's an opportunity to both explore what carbon emissions reductions look like. But I can understand what you're sharing, Robin, and we're happy to sit down further and brief you and tell you where those projects, how the projects are shaping out. But we're very much seeing those at this moment as just a pilot projects to understand, are there real emissions reductions opportunities here? What are broader benefits in terms of creating housing that are possible?
Yeah, so just one quick follow-up question, thank you, is how much are you talking about for this pilot? And I would like to follow up to get a better understanding of, how we can achieve carbon emissions reductions through these, conversions, from commercial to real estate. It's something that I just like to get a better understanding of.
We're talking about 6 to 7 million.
Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you, Robin. Meg?
Yeah, hi committee members. I want to comment a little on the fiscal budget thing, just like a co-chair perspective, and Ranfis, feel free to chime in after me. And then Sam, a couple questions to you on the federal point. So just, yeah, fellow committee members, a little bit more, this might be a slightly redundant or a different perspective than what Sam was saying, just that, I think a constant theme for us as a PCEF committee is pressure when there's a difficult city budget. And we're kind of in an interesting moment now with the new city council, but yeah, the budget news is not great. And as much as I'm keeping my ears on it, some counselors have thought that our reserve funds were more than what they are and raised questions in the media about that. That was in an Oregonian article, I believe. And on Twitter, some counselors are saying that. And so if you read the article in the Oregonian that Gosha wrote last week, Ranfis and I think were quoted. We were interviewed and talked about that, and we tried to mention that our reserve fund is really less than it's not 500 million, it's 100 million or less. And most of our money is allocated through our climate investment plan. So that's just the line we say over and over. But just kind of noting that pressure is sort of out there right now. And I know that all the city councilors are hosting various budget forums in the different districts, and we might just need to kind of keep our ears on all that. Yeah, and then Ranfis and I are going to be representing PCEF, the PCEF committee, I should say, at some upcoming conversations. So would love to just kind of have an open dialogue with y'all and about that. And yeah, besides Gosha's article in the Oregonian, I also spoke with a reporter from Street Roots who's doing maybe a longer form article that is going to talk a little bit about the budget, but he was also just interested in the positive impacts of PCEF and its transformative potential, which is a more joyful conversation. And so I keep encouraging staff to bring us the good news about what PCEF's doing on the ground, because I want to make sure that gets told in the news as much, if not more, than PCEF as a budget filler. So that's just kind of some more comments on the budget issue. Happy to hear more from other people about that. And Sam, my questions to you on the federal context. Thanks for sharing. And just a comment to all of us, these are difficult times for climate justice work, indeed, really distressing for democracy. But on the climate justice front, more specifically, I really feel for our community-based orgs who are and our bureau partners who are getting this seesaw messaging from the federal government. So I'm super empathetic, and that just slows down good work too. I'm glad to hear that we don't see any impacts, and I'm glad that your staff's thinking about it. And I just wanted to ask Sam, it sounded like you were talking about our community-based partners, but is that true that our bureau partners and all of our 82nd Avenue, I think, had a federal match, our Broadway corridor, I think, involved some federal dollars. So I'm just curious if your comments encompass the whole landscape or if it was just about community-based orgs. And then I'm almost hesitant to bring this up, but I'm just curious if you're seeing or if there's any flags being raised about any DEI or equity related language in our programming. And we are our own city program, so anyway, maybe I'll just leave it at that.
We are always sensitive to and ensuring that as it relates to our programs that we're making sure that we're always on the right side of the law. So that's something that's ever present in our work. So but maybe just to be clear, yeah, the point around the federal impacts does extend, to my knowledge. Obviously, there's right now it does extend to the full swath of both city bureaus as well as projects such as 82nd Avenue. There's a real, we know that some of the particular critique that's coming from the federal government is at target at particular programs. And so we've been able to kind of follow the lines of those different, programs, whether that's related to the Inflation Reduction Act and others. And fortunately, a lot of the funding streams that we've consistently tapped as a city fall outside of those funding streams. Absolutely. Many of the things we're talking about also fall within those. And so right now it's really I suspect you're going to see at some point some of these cancellations happening and the terminations actually happening. So let me be abundantly clear. There's chaos that's being created because of the uncertainty now, and we'll see some, but right now we're really in a holding pattern is what is my observation from my seat across all our work with our partners, community-based organizations, as well as city and regional governments. And then to your budget point, I know there's a couple of hands, and I'll just say this. Absolutely, one of our Absolutely. A big portion of this next week is to just really clearly state for members of the public as well as for our council colleagues to share just exactly the commitments that we have made so that it is clear the allocations that have been made to date. So that's correct.
Thank you so much, Sam.
I'll just chime in here just because Megan called me out here. I think Megan and I will continue, I think, to do the rounds as we make connections and develop a relationship with the new council. We had the opportunity to meet with the mayor and city administrator earlier in the year. I think as we hear about PCEF in the news, I think we're going to continue. I think our role here as a committee is continue to be good stewards for this fund and making sure we have access to good information. So I, again, encourage folks to reach out to Sam and team to make sure that we have good information, well-rounded information, and be able to bring well-rounded information back to our networks and folks. So one, that's, I think, really important. Two, I think ultimately, our role with the mayor's office and the city administration and council it's ultimately going to be about collaboration. But I'm just going to stress that we need to look at not just the short-term problems, but our task and stewards is also to take the long view, hence why we do look at things as a 5-year investment commitment. So the challenges we're facing today are unfortunate, like hearing about potential budget cuts of the city does impact city services. It does impact climate work, just like federal cuts impacts climate work and climate action. Additionally, we also have other challenges that relate to PCEF. Like we know based on reporting around climate, climate is going to continue to increase. It's going to impact people's pocketbooks. We know based on the Pacific Northwest Utility Conference Committee that by 2032, the demand for load for energy is going to increase by 30%, that we should also anticipate more vulnerability for the state of Oregon to experience things like blackouts. So those are, again, not from my perspective that those are the things that are happening. These are from published reports from the Pacific Northwest Utility Committee Conference. So there are things I think we might not be, we're sort of focused on a current crisis at the city, but there are other things that are going to impact Portlanders down the road. And I think it's really important to take the long view as well for what our mission work is and work collaboratively with all stakeholders of the city. So I just want to sort of continue we've weathered the storm before. I think it's important that we continue to weather the storm, but continue to have a collaborative spirit as we approach things. And I think be truth tellers and bring good information just as stewards of the fund. So everyone's been really great at that, but continue to use Sam and staff as a resource for bringing good rounded information.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Ranfis. Tracy, Faith, D'Angelo, any questions? Comments?
No, I don't have any questions. I think my committee members did a pretty good job of summarizing the concerns of the community. And Sam's done a good job of addressing those same concerns.
Thank you. Tracy?
Dr. Moses, no, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Faith or Alicia?
Appreciate the update. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Our next slide is a break. But I have the power to keep us going if we like. But I want to check in with Sam and see what your thoughts are.
I would, part of me wants to encourage a break because it just is a nice break point and we might just be able to get out earlier. So I would just encourage a 5-minute break. We come back and then we may be able to jump back in and move a little quicker. So I defer to you, Dr. Moses, if 5 minutes feels appropriate. That's what we had planned for. So, yep. Okay.
Take 5. 6:37, pretty please. Come back at 6:37. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Sure does go by fast, doesn't it? All right, next slide, please. And I just want to double check that we're recording, that we're not on pause.
Yep.
Okay, we're good.
That's correct.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Rachel. All right, annual CIP update process and timeline. Next
Okay.
slide. Mhm.
Thank you. I'll just start before I jump into the next slide. This is just a reminder for everyone that the climate investment plan that we first passed in 2023 was our first go. Little did we know that one, we were going to have substantial additional resources, and so that sent us obviously into a flurry last year where we made quick work, leaned on our existing efforts, understanding and projects that were in motion within the city, and amended the plan. And now what we're hoping here to do is come up with a more regular cadence around how we do this, in acknowledgement that there's going to be a tremendous amount of lessons learned as we go along, adjustments we need to make to programs, sometimes technical adjustments, minor adjustments, sometimes more major adjustments as we understand what's working well and what isn't working well. And as we understand new opportunities that are coming up. I'd like to see really this annual update process as just that. It's an annual update process. It's something that gets us moving in the in-between years and trying to, and our big objective here is trying to figure out a process that's structured right. Acknowledging that every 5 years, we put the big investment in to run something more akin to a 12-month process where we do that deep engagement and work. But in the in-between, we're touching base and we're figuring out how do we make adjustments. And so, that's just that reminder there. And we will be coming to the next 5-year climate investment plan here again really soon, really in the early part of 2027. I believe, I've got to double check the calendar, we'll begin that process, just given when we need to have it done in order to align with and not have a sharp drop off, but a smooth transition. And so this process we're discussing here is something we're teeing up for this current year. And something we expect to play out the next few years. And so that's what I'll share, and I'll jump in. So I shared this next 2 slides you're going to see I shared with you all last go around, and we just got a little bit more detailed slides. And then it's largely for discussion for the group, and we'll see if we get you all out early. But again, as I shared, the annual update process to incorporate some more lessons learned, align our outcomes and goals. So there's just adjustments, there are changes that we learn. We're like, these measures, these metrics aren't exactly right. There is some just optimizing our resource allocation, understanding there's some programs that are going to go gangbusters, do really well, and it presents an opportunity for us to bring more resources to those programs, and some that are going to go slow, and we're going to have discussions on to see, is resources going to this program the right set of resources? And then in times and moments, figuring out a place and a process to respond to emerging needs and opportunities. It is inevitable things will come up, such as the heat wave and the heat dome that we experienced several years ago, and just understanding when those things come up, are there places to respond to it? Sometimes maybe so, sometimes maybe not, but at least having a process and a place to capture that. Now, what I'm sharing here is what we refined is, I think between the last meeting, we've talked about this process taking 3 to 5 months and complete. Originally, I think we said complete by October. What we're realizing is that it's probably going to be complete closer to November, December, and you'll see that in the next slide that I tee up. But what we're trying to do really is annually aligning this with the city budget process, with updates that take effect at the start of the next fiscal year. So whatever we do when we come to updating the climate investment plan, the updates taking place July 1st of the following fiscal year. And that's just starting to try to figure out how we time these things with some of the things that matter for our city flows, the flows in the way that we think about resources and allocating resources, even if they're going externally, and so forth. And then the objective here is really focusing on programs in implementation stage. Once we get beyond this next year and a half, all our programs will be under implementation and underway. And moving forward, for the most part, that's going to be the nature of the programming. Even when we get into the next climate investment plan, sometimes you create new programming, you sunset some programming. But right now, the focus will definitely be on programs that are in implementation stage. And then just expectation of a lot of the substantive work happening in subcommittees. And so these are some of the draft process objectives we wrote out last go around. 1, transparency, just ensuring the process is clear and consistent. 2, that it's equity centered, that we're prioritizing meaningful engagement with our priority populations, using equity and metrics to inform our decision making. 3, that it's data driven, ground up, we updates are based on performance data and outcomes from funded programs. And then flexibility and responsiveness, just making sure we have opportunities to respond to needs and adjust. Now, these are what we captured as our objectives of the process. What I want to share, and as we walk through this, and I think this is something I want to make sure this group really walks away with, is this year, it's largely we're going to be working and practicing what this looks like, meaning that we're not going to have a lot of these pieces in place, but it's going to be important that we talk about what we're aspiring towards and what we're building on. And this dovetails with our staffing up. We currently stand at 32 FTE, but by the end of the year, I expect us to be close to about 50 FTE. And so a lot of this is just to say that there's going to be a lot of learnings, and I want the group, as we go through this, really to cement in our heads right now that we're going to be learning this year. And while these are the objectives we're going to work towards, it's going to mean that we're not going to have all of these pieces lined up because we haven't built some of these systems processes to capture all that, and we're building out all these pieces as we go. But before I move to the next slide, I did see a question, and really the next slide, I'm going to dive a lot deeper into sort of how we see this playing out and how folks should start conceptualizing what they're going to get in the coming months.
Any questions? I don't see any. Sam, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we're really breaking down here in these next slide, this slide specifically, is just how we expect the work to flow. And I'm gonna read it. I thought about how to parse this out, but I'll read it for folks, so don't feel the need to squint too much. But it's really broken out into 3 phases, and part of this is us just mapping and getting a greater understanding of what the flow of information and data is going to look like between city bureaus that are receiving PCEF funding, between our community grants, as well as our strategic programs that we're administering with external partners. And so you're going to see really this is broken down to 3 phases, and the phases are drawn on when we think we're going to have appropriate information and data. And the 3 phases we're tying them to, really the work that's happening in right now, evaluation and reporting subcommittee, but that may be different. And then second phase is evaluations reporting subcommittee. And then the third phase is really when we bring it up to the full committee. But so what we envision here is really starting in July that we would first start with diving into both the community grants as well as the non-city led strategic programs over the course of 2 to 3 meetings. The first phase of that really involving just we would provide a status update for all of our programs. And that would be the call to action there for the evaluation reporting subcommittee would be, and it would look something like this: community grants, strategic program 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, ongoing on schedule, ongoing ahead of schedule. It's in contracting on schedule. It's on hold, or it's in the pilot phase. And so we're going to be giving you those sort of status updates and asking you all to pick a handful of programs to start with. And I think that you may want to dive into programs that are on hold to better understand the constraints there, whether they're staffing or other reasons or technical constraints, or programs that are ongoing, ahead of schedule, behind schedule, just to better understand them. And what we would say is if it's in contracting, there's nothing to really evaluate. We would explain where that is, but it's really to make sure that we're focused on evaluation on the programs where we've got some outputs and outcomes to evaluate, and certainly have a meaningful conversation around those that haven't gotten to that stage. Then staff would really lead this, but we would provide information to evaluate and assess what is our community grants demand, strategic program performance, our expenditures across those programs. And then we would share with you all a recommended set of either technical adjustments or program scope amendments. We can say with confidence now we have a range of technical adjustments we've already been capturing as part of just us implementing some of our programming. And then we would look to and again, that focus being on the community grants and non-city-led projects. And I'll explain why in the next sort of phase. Then we would look to the subcommittee over the course of those 2 to 3 meetings to start developing recommendations for either increased funding, decreased funding, or level funding for each program. Now, for instance, we can already tell you there's at least one program that has been ahead of schedule. We know with confidence we are going to be coming and bringing that to you on asking for increased funding and explaining that and justifying that. But that would be the sort of conversation we'd expect to have on each of the programs that have been under implementation. And this is going to be this is where there's a bit of the figuring things out, evaluating our projected available resources through June of 2029, and then reallocating those based on whether there's a surplus or a deficit, and ultimately developing draft funding recommendations and adjustments in consultation with stakeholders. This is something in a future state. We want this. This is where we want to be robust. But when we talk about stakeholders, obviously that's certainly you all, but that's certainly staff. That's certainly potentially council committees, as well as other groups that have expressed feedback and input on particular programs. So all of this is going to have to happen in a span of really about 2 months. So it will be tight. And so I think I want to make sure folks are understanding sort of what we're expecting to bring. And we can already share that we will be bringing you all, and the focus for this initial phase on this part will be our community grants, a couple of our strategic programs focused on schools, and then 1 or 2 other strategic programs in this particular phase. Then when we move to the next phase, and we're parsing this out, it's largely because of information availability. In September, we'd expect to bring you all the city-led strategic programs in a similar fashion. And the reason being that the city closes its fiscal year in June 30, 2025, and it takes about a couple months to reconcile all the books. And so we expect to have a certain set of conversations with the city bureaus to get the right information so that we can come to you all with this. But part of that is making sure they've closed their books so we can fully do a look back across all of the work that's happened across the city bureaus. And so there we'd be looking at reviewing all the city-led strategic programs, similarly assessing performance, expenditures, reviewing their updated projections. And then we would likely be sharing with you all recommended technical adjustments and program scope amendments. Similarly here, we have a whole host of already teed up technical adjustments that we've been capturing as we've gone along the way with our city bureau partners. And so we expect this year to be a fairly sizable year where you're going to see a lot of technical adjustments. And that's just because we were told one thing, and as we've gotten into it, either the metrics weren't quite the right metrics for them to capture because just the difficulty in capturing those metrics, or other changes of similar nature. Similarly, we would work with you all to develop recommendations for increase, decrease, or level funding for each program. And then the expectation is releasing those draft funding recommendations and adjustments for public comment and putting them out there for public comment. We'd synthesize those comments, revise those, update the recommendations, and then the subcommittee would ultimately make a recommendation to the full committee, which would be tasked with reviewing and taking action on those, and then having a broader discussion on that, and then recommending the amendment to the climate investment plan. Now, all of this is on the basis that what we're talking about are small adjustments. We can share with decent amount of confidence that we're not going to see the kind of adjustments we have seen in the past in terms of our incoming revenues. I think that we're getting more and more comfortable with that we expect that the next really major sort of, and I'll speak to this, major realignment would largely happen because funding is removed from one program to another. That would be where you'd see major realignment or opportunities for funding, but you're not going to see large increases short of when we get to like the next common investment plan and the slate is clear again. What I will share is that because this September 2025 will be the first year that we've had city projects under our belt, this will likely be a year where we're going to be getting an understanding of what happened, what worked well, what didn't. We expect the major realignment opportunity, particularly for our city projects, where there's going to be an opportunity to say, is this going well or is this not? Likely in September of 2026. And that's just because you kind of need to give them a year to get underway, to figure things out. There's going to be a lot of us asking questions and understanding what's working well, what's not. It's really going to be the second year when we come back around to that same phase, ask those same set of questions, that we're going to have that real opportunity where we're saying we're at year 2 here. We've only got a few more years, and if we're substantially off, then that's really where we expect to see that major opportunity to realign resources and have that discussion. So this is sort of how we see this playing. It is a few things. It's a really tight time frame. That's partially between when we have information, and so some of these programs might have information earlier. But with the city projects, a lot of as we've been honing and refining where we have really good information, it is going to be coming at the end once the fiscal year is closed and the books have closed and our ability to look back. And so, and largely we're trying to get to this process so that it is done as we get ready to get into the budget for the following year, so that we don't sort of run into the budget and get into what has always been a bit of a chaotic period, but that we've squared away, had these discussions, understood and contextualized all the different concepts and ideas that are before us in a process, using a process that we can use to make sense of them. So I think that's what I have. In the next slide here, I've just got a set of considerations. It's really reiterating what I've shared here before, and then some questions for you all. Yeah.
Beautiful. Go right ahead.
So I think the considerations here is for the 2025 year, really it's focusing on a handful of programs. Like I noted, that larger realignment opportunity we expect is in fall of 2026, particularly with the city bureau projects. That's not to say there isn't going to be some clear points in places where there's going to be some discussion to be had. I would say this year is really going to be about focusing on refining the process. And I want to emphasize this, considering this as much as possible as a practice year. We're going to need to figure out what is better information to get, but we're still in parallel building out a lot of the systems that'll reinforce and help us get this information better next year. And then, like I said, using this process to prepare for that larger realignment in 2026. So I think the questions, just some initial questions that came to mind for us are there certain elements you want to see at the full committee versus subcommittee? There's an assumption here. Most of the work is going to happen in subcommittee space, but we will have opportunities to bring the full committee along in small groups, as well as in full committee meetings in between that sort of July to, November timeframe. So then, does it feel sufficient for folks that are not going to be part of the subcommittee to be brought along in small group meetings and full committee meetings? So you've really got about 2 touch points a month outside of that. And then as individuals, if there are specific roles that interest you in this update process, please let us know. So I'll stop there. You don't feel bound to that, but start there.
I would love to, call on each person, make sure we get feedback from every committee member. So Tracy, thank you so much for starting us off.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. This was a great update here. I'm curious when you say a handful, I think on the previous slide, you had 2 to 3. And I'm just curious, I don't know if 2 to 3 would be satisfactory. Like I could imagine that a handful to me would be closer to 5. And then wondering if the July timeframe would be enough for us to you just have 2 to 3 meetings. Sorry about that. So you're saying 2 to 3 meetings. So we would look at maybe 5 or more, perhaps, of the strategic programs, and perhaps have that evaluation.
Yeah, I think the real part that I think when you step back is, if you look at our first really 16 strategic programs, really strategic programs, 2 and 3 are out for RFP right now. So by the time we get to, we won't have much. We will still be going in the contracting phase, and they'll just be getting going. A strategic program 4 is still in development as well. Then you get to strategic program 6. That's the e-bike program in contracting. 7, that's our transportation wallet that is under play with PBOT. So that is in motion. Strategic program 8 is our tree planting program. So a lot of the programs where they're underway tend to be the city programs. Strategic program 1 was our affordable housing program with Portland Housing Bureau. So that was where that was just when we stepped back and we looked at where we've got some of the ones that have been actively moving, they tend to be within the city bureaus, and you'll have that touch point. And so we'll come back and we'll have a list that'll look more akin like this. And I expect it'll be exactly the kind of questions you're asking, like where are the rest of them, and we'll walk through that.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question, Tracy. Thank you so much, Robin.
Yeah, I have a question and an answer. So I'll start with the answer, and that is, I think, full committee, subcommittee. I think, for me, I think as long as there's an opportunity for the full committee to kind of chime in at appropriate points and give meaningful, feedback and kind of direction and guidance. How that looks, obviously, I don't know, but I hope that there's an opportunity to do that. My question is, at the end of this process, we make a recommendation, and it is still up to City Council then to approve that. And if that is true, this sounds like, and you said this dovetails with the city's kind of overall budget process. This then runs the risk of, come, at the budget time, the city council saying, well, PCEF, you have, an extra $25 million this year. We're not going to accept that. And instead, we're going to put it towards something else. So I just want to get an understanding of the playing field that we're working with. Is that a possible viability of, reality?
It is ultimately council's decision, right? Council is the ultimate decision maker on the plan as well as the budget. That said, I think it's fair to say that having a clear, there's a complexity, and it's clear even in our briefings that what we do and what PCEF does is incredibly complex, and we fund in many different spaces. And understanding that is challenging, and evaluating and comparing the range of our investments takes a lot of work, and doing diligent, rigorous evaluation to say, should we invest in this here or this here, takes work, and processes there to help us work through that. And I think so. I think what partially we've got to work through is show that this is a workable process, one, and that as you work through this, it's part of, we certainly counsel stakeholders, and it's important that they on the other side are not surprised by anything we bring forth. So that's the work we've got to figure out. And I think right now there's a lot of figuring out that's happening within council, and that's sort of why I want to emphasize that practice nature. We've got to still figure out what is that, how are we interacting with our committees at council, and making sure that when this comes to them on the other side, that they've been tracking this as well, that they know this is the work we've been doing, this is the process we've been taking, the input we've been engaging, getting in. And so, but that's all just to say that that's the work we do, so that ultimately there is buy-in from you all, from city leadership on the administrative side, and ultimately from a majority of council.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Thanks for the question, Robin. D'Angelo, welcome in.
I was actually just writing some notes down. Can we go to the next slide? I want to make sure I hit all the questions. So in terms of certain elements that I would love to see at the full committee versus a subcommittee, I think it's imperative that the full committee has some sort of oversight and ability to address if there are any performance concerns or performance accolades. If there are programs that are doing better, I think the full committee should know about that and be able to chime in on whether or not we have reallocation conversations, whether we're funding more or pulling funding or making sort of those kind of recommendations. I don't think those should come. I think those should be part of a larger, 1,000-foot view update for the immediate full committee. But I certainly don't know if I believe that small group meetings will work to keep everyone informed. They're just generally, they're generally pretty short. And as we're going through this process, the fact that we already have a pretty strict timeline, I think it was, July, September, November, there's only a month in between, which means we'd only have, July, September, November, which means that, in that month, If you're really reviewing these programs, whether they can be community grants or city lead led programs, there's just not enough time in a small group meeting to really give a full purview of what it is that people are seeing, especially if there are concerns, because then we'd have to dig into what those concerns are. I think each committee member would definitely want to be abreast of this. As an example, let's say there's 3 programs that are either on hold or behind schedule. That is in itself a whole conversation that people are going to want to have the full story of. And I just don't think that 2 or 3 touch points are going to be enough for that. I know for me, I would definitely want more touch points than that. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but for me, that's definitely what I would want to see. And then if we can go back to the last slide, or the next slide, just so I can make sure I hit that last question too. For me, specific roles that I'm interested in is definitely measuring performance, projections, and recommendations, especially as it pertains to the city programs, given the process in which those came to PCEF, and the promises that they made to deliver, especially when it comes to community benefits. I would definitely want to know the performance of what that looks like, and make sure that I can be informed to give recommendations if I were to be on the subcommittee to our full committee body. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, D'Angelo. Great questions, great concerns. Faith, do you have any feedback?
Hi there. Thank you so much for the offer. And thanks for the presentation. I guess I want to just first and foremost thank you, Sam and staff, for a really thoughtful process. And I do feel like the emphasis on it being practice is also really important. I mean, clearly we don't have all this information now, so it will change somewhat as we get more information and we discover what's most important and where there's a need for additional process or less process. I guess I'll kind of provide a counterpoint perhaps to what D'Angelo shared, as I really do think that most of this work can happen in subcommittee and that's the most effective and efficient way of doing it. And while as a full committee, I think that there should be opportunities for feedback and buy-in, I also think it's just information sharing that's the most important. And I imagine you're going to want to be doing that for the full public as well, because we're building that narrative. So I would just encourage that in addition to the touch points through meetings, whether those are small group or public, larger meetings like this one, that we just have some forum or some way of making sure that committee members are also abreast of all the public information. I know I feel like I sometimes need to go searching, and that's my own fault. But if I had, some kind of a more frequent and reliable update, maybe then I could also be more effective in my talks with my neighbors, or the walk down the street when people hear things. So just encouraging some form of communication that doesn't need to be any different than the rest of the public, but just to make sure that it's in our inboxes. And as far as a role to play, I really look to others to where do you want me? That's where I'd like to serve. So that's it. Thank you so much,
Faith. Yeah, those are great suggestions, and deeply appreciate the thoughtful feedback. Thank you. Welcome in, Alicia. Would you like to give some feedback on any of the questions and the considerations? If you can. I know. *9.
Can you hear me now?
Yay.
Okay, sorry, I'm back home. I think this all sounds reasonable. I'm really curious to know what the feedback has been from our new council members, knowing that we're going to have to work really closely in partnership with them to implement a lot of these programs.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Alicia, is that it?
Yeah, that was my question, please.
We've been signaling that this is going to be part of the process so that they understand that this will come back to them, as well as they kind of try to understand where they get in there. That said, when we've briefed each of the council districts and council members from those districts, and we've had at this point one briefing with many of the offices, and which means it's been a lot of information. So I don't know that amongst all the information that's on their way, whether that this part has been captured, but we have been clear about that and signaled that this will come towards them. So I think we're gonna be clear about that again this next week around just spelling out how, when we talk about the 1.6 billion we have allocated through June of 2029, what does that look like? What does it look like to implement that over the course of that time? And the fact, just indicating clearly to them each year we will come back to them. And I think so. I think this coming Thursday will be hopefully a more clear opportunity to indicate that and to hear from them on that.
Great, thank you. I hope we get an update once you have more feedback from them, just so we can plan accordingly.
Thank you so much for that guidance, Alicia. That's wonderful. Ranfis.
Thanks. Great conversation so far, and thank you for the presentation outline. I'll just say, like, process is good. We should have a process to hang our head on, and it should be clear for all folks, like, what exactly we want. I'll try to kind of answer question one that you have here, although I'm going to ask more questions. Like, I guess the thing that I see missing, I see a lot of opportunities for inputs, and I would hope that the committee has an opportunity, the full committee has an opportunity for, goal setting. So the challenge here that we have is there's a lot of inputs, a lot of potential for applications. But what's really important, once we get to the stages of evaluation, we have to have some kind of goal. We kind of have to have a rubric for how we score. These are going to ultimately be apples to oranges. So are we going to let scoring tell us how we're funding, or are we going to set goals, and goals help reflect, how we're going to allocate funds and how we prioritize, and then create the best apples to apples comparisons when we're doing the scoring. So I think that's what I want to kind of lead into. Like, it's always difficult when we don't have goals to get apples to oranges and use one sort of scoring rubric to see what floats to the top. So, I hope that the committee has a role in working with staff, setting the criteria for how we score and what are our goals or allocations, and that being a consistent standard as we go to the evaluations, scoring phase, or whatever that ends up looking like in the subcommittee. But that's what I would kind of recommend. And, however we collaborate with staff, council and others, great. That's important to try to see if we can, get that in line that way. And if we need to make adjustments, we make the adjustments towards the tail end of the process if there's something that we messed up in process. So that, I think, is kind of my hope and elements that we could see in the full committee. I agree with the sentiments. Like, I think a lot of the work could occur in the subcommittee work. But I think the more, maybe there are other months where we're really setting up the framework of what are those goals. And hopefully, as this council, new form of government, rolls out, we can have and sort of other elements with the city around sort of a more strategic vision for how we address climate action with the city. We can have a sense of how we're really rowing our boat towards this long goal of, making some real strategic investments, on climate action. So that's kind of where my head is at in terms of this response in the full committee versus subcommittee. The last component I wanted to say is, like, it seems like it's great that we're aligning towards the city budget process, right? That helps city internally. But again, I think, what does this mean for other funds and other groups? I know when we first initially started this program, we were thinking about how does it align with affordable housing and how they reach out for their incentive stack. So I'm sure making some shifts may change that. My other question will be, like, for schools, like, are we aligning with the school districts and how they think about their budget? So there's other forms of government, other stakeholders. Like, I think they're important to know that I think the broader public would agree, hey, strategic investments are going to be important here. So anyway, sorry, I'm adding more questions, but Sam, I appreciate this presentation, but I think hopefully it gives you a flavor, my thoughts of where the full committee can play a role. And again, just in general agreement on subcommittee work.
Thank you so much. Meg, welcome in.
Hi, yeah, my fellow committee members have raised lots of good points. So I don't actually think I have a whole lot to say about this in addition to what they have. I will sort of bring up just a different subcommittee need that I think we have, which is not exactly this, but I'm just reflecting a lot on our committee capacity. And, we're still down a few members and like hope we get those filled soon. So Sam, that's kind of a question to you. But I see a role, and as co-chair, I think this is sort of the role I would play, is in committee member recruitment and then reflecting on our bylaws and kind of strategic thinking about the committee. So before I would commit to number 3 here, so I am sort of responding to 3, and that rather than, I feel like co-chairs, or at least one of us, should defer our time to that more type of subcommittee or work group that would also be meeting regularly to make sure our committee is well served and being sustained over the time. So that's a little bit of a side conversation, but I think just as important and one we haven't talked enough about. I flag that we'll be saying goodbye to Ranfis and Faith, I believe, by the end of the year. We're down 2 right now, and I'm also hoping we'll need to fulfill new co-chairs. So I just think there's some other committee work besides reviewing this that also needs to happen. So a little bit of a side conversation.
I will maybe respond to that and work my way backwards. Yes, and I think I know that. Thank you. I believe it's Faith and D'Angelo are on the review, and I know there's some more interviews, so we should get back to there pretty closely. Once we get through the recommendations on new committee members through you all, then the question will be navigating the council process. And so I will be abundantly clear. It takes. We're figuring that out right now. We're packaging up our content so we can get it's a different process. We don't get to request it by way of our commissioner. We've got to ask for permission. Can we get on the council calendar? So it's just we're working through that, and I think there's a healthy lead time. So I say that so that once we get past the committee and I think our April meeting when we want to bring forward those names, we don't want you all to be surprised by the length of time it'll take on the other side. Then working my way back, I think it's going to be, and this is really the manage expectations, and it largely actually dovetails off of, I think, Faith, I think you made this question or asked to us last time around, could we do it as staff? That's something that's very much on top of our minds as we're going through a lot of recruitment, and as you all know, you onboard someone, it still takes the better part of 6 months. And so that's why we're really trying to state what's our ideal here and what can we expect this year in the process. We know for a fact that there's going to be a lot of adjustments we're going to make to the goals that programs had committed to in the climate investment plan. Like there's adjustments because we're just seeing it pretty clear as day that some things aren't going to work. So there's a lot of technical adjustments we'll be making. But when we kind of step back, that broader, and it's something we'll reflect on. We know that the last amendment process was very fast. Yes, it came on the heels of our developing a climate, our climate investment plan, but it was fast. And so I think when you think about the stepping back and looking at the broader picture, that bigger view and sitting back, I would think about that in the context of the 5-year investment plan process. And so that's going to be coming up, like I said, and I think if I'm not mistaken, early 2027 is when we begin that. Late 2026 is when we start planning for that. And that's when we're sort of soup to nuts retooling the plan and looking at the plan anew. In these updates, I hope I'm not wrong, but I think we are really close, and partially we think we're close in terms of the revenues. That this is what these are the revenues. So it's really the adjustments within the existing programs, and where do we make adjustments in either direction. And so part of this is even on the revenues. One of the first touch points will be: are revenues still holding up? Or have they gone down? Do we need to be thinking about making cuts to programs, or do we need to be thinking about making additions? So those will all be part of the considerations in this. And we'll continue as we go along, just explaining our thought process around sort of how we're approaching it. But we feel more and more confident that we've got at least we're at least know sort of what we're working with, and it's largely trying to align this with both the time, and I think in out due respect, I think we want to be able to make sure we're able to deliver on a process, get to recommendation, do so in time for the next budget cycle. So we've got at least a little practice under our belt to say, this is how you do it. You want to do it, you want to have something, you come into this process. And so that's the process is very much what we're thinking about right now.
Wonderful, Sam. Thank you. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Sam, do you have what you need? Oh, Sam, do you have what you need?
I do. I think we do have what we need. And Robin, I'll make sure we follow up with you. We have what we need, and just appreciate you all. I think it's nice to get in a rhythm where we're not so reactive, and to be able to plan a little more thoughtfully for the next go. So absolutely.
Babs, I see your hand, but unfortunately public comment has already come and gone. And so I invite you to send emails to Sam and ask questions that way if needed, or join us for public comment next month. Is that pretty much standard for this committee? Okay.
Yeah, that Babs got you. Just please feel free to email me and we'll follow up.
Beautiful. All right, everyone. Great meeting, wonderful recommendations and considerations. I'm so excited for our work going forward, and I would love to adjourn this meeting at 7:18 p.m. Great work. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Dr. Moses.
Bye.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Well.